The explosion tore through the transport ship like a knife through paper. Daniel Hayes felt his body slam against the metal wall as the world turned upside down. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. The alarm screamed in his ears. Smoke filled the cabin and burned his lungs. He was going to die. He knew this with complete certainty. The ship hit the ground with a sound like thunder. Metal bent and broke. Glass shattered into a million pieces. Daniel flew through the air and landed hard on something soft. The world went black. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in purple grass. The sky above him was orange and filled with two small moons. His head hurt. His left arm was bleeding. His ribs felt like someone had kicked them with steel boots. But he was alive. Daniel pushed himself up slowly. Every part of his body screamed in pain. He looked around and saw the remains of his transport ship scattered across the alien landscape. Smoke rose from the wreckage in thick black clouds. He was the only survivor. The pilot, the co-pilot, and the 3 other soldiers who had been with him were all dead. He checked his weapons. His rifle was gone, lost somewhere in the crash, but his pistol was still in its holster on his hip. He pulled it out and checked the ammunition. 12 shots, not much but better than nothing. Daniel knew where he was. This was the 3rd moon of Prime, deep in enemy territory. They controlled this entire system. They would have seen his ship go down. They would be coming to check for survivors, and when they found him, they would kill him. The war between humanity and had been going on for 7 years. Daniel had joined the United Earth Defense Corps when he was just 20 years old. Now he was 27, and he had seen more death than any man should see in a lifetime. He had watched friends die. He had killed soldiers in battle. He had learned to hate the enemy with every fiber of his being. There were monsters. Everyone knew this. They stood 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in hard shells like insects. They had 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through steel. Their faces were nightmares of compound eyes and clicking mandibles. They showed no mercy to human prisoners. The stories of what they did to captured soldiers were too horrible to repeat. Daniel started walking. He had no plan except to get as far away from the crash site as possible. Maybe he could find a place to hide. Maybe he could survive long enough for a rescue team to find him. The chances were small, but they were all he had. The purple jungle stretched out in every direction. Strange trees with twisted trunks rose toward the orange sky. Plants with leaves like razors grew thick on the ground. Sounds he did not recognize echoed through the air. This was an alien world, and everything on it wanted him dead. He walked for 2 hours before his legs gave out. He sat down against a tree and drank the last of the water from his survival pack. His arm had stopped bleeding, but it was starting to swell. He needed medical attention, but there was none to be had. That was when he heard the sound. It was high and thin, like a baby crying, but it was not a human baby. The sound was too sharp, too strange. Daniel held his breath and listened. The crying continued, coming from somewhere to his left. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Every lesson he had learned in 7 years of war told him to walk away. But something in that sound made him pause. There was pain in it. There was fear. Daniel stood up and followed the noise. He found the source in a small crater about 50 meters from where he had been resting. Another ship had crashed here, but this one was not human. The design was curved and organic, made of the same shell-like material that covered bodies. Enemy craft. Civilian transport by the look of it. The crying was coming from beneath the wreckage. Daniel approached slowly, his pistol raised. His heart beat so hard he could feel it in his throat. If there were survivors, they would try to kill him. He should shoot first. He should not take any chances. But when he reached the edge of the crater and looked down, he froze. 3 small creatures were trapped under a piece of the broken ship. They were, but not like any he had ever seen. They were tiny, no bigger than cats. Their shells were soft and almost clear, like they were made of jelly instead of armor. Their compound eyes were huge in their small faces, and those eyes were looking up at him with pure terror. They were Bobbies. Daniel stood there for a long moment. His finger rested on the trigger of his pistol, one shot each. That was all it would take. He would be doing his duty. He would be killing the enemy. No one would ever know. But he could not do it. He put his pistol back in its holster and climbed down into the crater. The young made frightened clicking sounds as he approached. They tried to crawl away, but they were stuck. The piece of wreckage had them pinned. Daniel grabbed the edge of the metal and pulled. His injured arm screamed in protest. His ribs felt like they were on fire. But he pulled anyway, using every bit of strength he had left. The metal moved slowly, inch by inch, until finally there was enough space for the small creatures to escape. They did not run. They huddled together in a pile, shaking with fear, their big eyes watching him. Daniel looked around. He could not leave them here. Predators would find them. The cold night would kill them. They would die alone and afraid. He was losing his mind. He knew this. He was about to do something that could get him executed for treason. But he had looked into their eyes and he had seen something he recognized. He had seen the same fear he had felt when his ship was falling from the sky. He reached down and picked up the smallest one. It made a frightened squeak but did not try to bite him. He tucked it inside his jacket, against his chest. The other two watched him with what might have been hope. He picked them up too. Daniel Hayes, soldier of the United Earth Defense Corps, enemy of all, walked into the purple jungle with 3 alien bobbies hidden inside his clothes. He had no idea what he was going to do. He had no idea how he was going to keep them alive. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let them die. Not today. Daniel found the cave system on the second day. He had been walking through the jungle for hours, carrying the 3 small inside his jacket, when he stumbled upon a crack in the rocks at the base of a small hill. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, but it led to a larger chamber inside. The cave was dark and cool. Water dripped from the ceiling into small pools on the ground. It was not much, but it was shelter. It was a place to hide. He set the young down on the dry stone floor. They huddled together immediately, clicking softly to each other in their strange language. Daniel watched them for a moment, then collapsed against the cave wall. He was exhausted. His arm was swollen and hot to the touch. His body felt like it had been broken into pieces and put back together wrong. But he was alive, and so were they. The first problem was food. Daniel had 3 protein bars left in his survival pack. They were meant for humans, not. He had no idea if the aliens could eat them. He had no idea what bobbies were supposed to eat at all. He broke off a small piece of one bar and held it out to the largest of the 3 young. This one had a shell with a faint blue color to it, different from the others. Daniel had started calling it Blue in his head. Blue looked at the food with its big compound eyes. Its mandibles clicked nervously. Then slowly, it reached out with one small claw and took the piece. Daniel held his breath as Blue put the food in its mouth. The small alien chewed slowly, its whole body tense. Then it swallowed. Nothing bad happened. Blue looked at Daniel and made a soft chirping sound that almost sounded like a question. Daniel smiled for the first time in days. He gave Blue another piece, then fed the other 2. The smallest one, which he called Little One, ate so fast that it almost choked. The middle one, the most curious of the 3, kept looking around the cave between bites. Daniel named that one Scout. They could eat the protein bars. That was good news, but the bars would not last forever. Daniel spent the next few days learning about his strange new companions. He watched how they moved, how they communicated, how they reacted to different things. He learned that flattened antennae meant they were scared. Raised front claws meant they were hungry. A soft humming vibration meant they were happy and content. They were not monsters. They were children. Scared, lost children who had just lost everything. On the 3rd night, the temperature dropped sharply. Daniel woke up shivering, his breath making clouds in the cold air. But something warm was pressed against his chest. He looked down and saw little one had crawled inside his jacket while he slept. The small alien was curled up against him, making that soft humming sound. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. He wrapped his arms around little one and held the small creature close. By morning, Blue and Scout had joined them, all three young piled on top of him for warmth. He was becoming attached to them. This was dangerous. This was foolish, but he could not stop it. During the days, Daniel explored the area around the cave, looking for food and water while keeping watch for enemy patrols. He found a stream nearby where he could refill his water bottle. He found strange fruits growing on some of the trees, though he was afraid to eat them. He found no sign of soldiers, which was both good and worrying. They should have been searching for survivors by now. The young ones stayed in the cave while he was gone. They seemed to understand that they needed to be quiet, that danger was all around them. When Daniel returned each day, they greeted him with excited clicks and chirps. Scout would present him with small stones or bits of plant that it had found. Blue would make a low, rumbling sound that Daniel interpreted as relief. Little one would immediately climb onto his shoulders and refuse to come down. They trusted him. Despite everything, despite the war, despite what their species had done to each other, they trusted him. Daniel started talking to them, not because they could understand him, but because the silence was too heavy. He told them about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans of his home world. He told them about his family, about his mother who had died when he was young and his father who had raised him alone. He told them about the war, about how he had become a soldier, about all the things he had done that kept him awake at night. The young listened to his voice. They did not understand his words, but they seemed to find comfort in the sound. Little one would fall asleep to his stories. Scout would tilt its head and click softly, as if asking questions. Blue would watch him with those big compound eyes, and Daniel could swear it was really listening. By the fourth day, Daniel's arm was getting worse. The wound had become infected. Red lines were spreading up toward his shoulder. He was running a fever. He knew what this meant. Without medicine, he would die. But he could not just lie down and give up. Not anymore. He had 3 small lives depending on him now. He told himself he just needed to hold on a little longer. A rescue team might still come. He might find a way to treat the infection with plants from the jungle. He might get lucky. He did not believe any of this, but he kept moving anyway. On the 5th morning, Daniel woke to a sound that made his blood run cold. Heavy footsteps outside the cave. The crack of branches breaking under great weight. A low clicking sound, deep and threatening, completely different from the soft chirps of the young ones. Adult, they had found him. Daniel reached for his pistol with his good hand. His bad arm hung useless at his side, burning with fever. The 3 young ones huddled behind him, pressing against his back. They were shaking. They knew what was coming. The entrance to the cave exploded inward. Rock and dust flew everywhere. Daniel shielded his eyes with his arm. When he looked up, a warrior stood in the opening. It was massive, 8 feet tall, with a shell that gleamed like polished metal. Its 4 arms ended in claws that could tear him apart in seconds. Its compound eyes locked onto him with a hatred he could feel in his bones. Daniel raised his pistol, 12 shots. He might take it down if he was lucky. He probably would not be lucky. But the warrior was not looking at him anymore. Its gaze had moved to the 3 small shapes hiding behind his legs. Its entire body went still. And then it made a sound that Daniel had never heard before. A low, mournful cry that echoed off the cave walls. A sound of grief and disbelief, and something that might have been hope. The warrior took a step forward. Daniel aimed his pistol at its head. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then little one crawled out from behind him and ran toward the massive alien. Daniel shouted for it to stop, but little one did not listen. The small creature ran straight to the warrior and began climbing up its leg, chirping and clicking frantically. The warrior looked down at Little One. Then it looked at Blue and Scout, still pressed against Daniel's back. Then it looked at Daniel himself. Something changed in those alien eyes. The hatred was still there, but now it was mixed with confusion, with wonder, with something Daniel could not name. The warrior did not attack. Instead, it lowered itself to the ground until its face was level with Daniel's, and it spoke. The warrior's voice came through a small device attached to its chest. The words were broken and strange, but Daniel could understand them. It was a translator, something that turned the clicking language into human speech. "You are human," the warrior said. It was not a question. Daniel nodded slowly. His pistol was still pointed at the warrior's head, but his hand was shaking. The fever was getting worse. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. "You have my young," the warrior continued. "You have kept them alive." "Yes," Daniel said. His voice came out as a croak. "They were trapped in the crash. I could not leave them to die." The warrior was silent for a long moment. Little One was still clinging to its leg, making happy chirping sounds. Blue and Scout had crept forward, their fear slowly being replaced by recognition. They knew this warrior. Daniel could see it in the way they moved toward her. Somehow, Daniel knew this warrior was female. Something about the patterns on her shell, the way she held herself, the sound of her voice through the translator. "I am," the warrior said, "brood matriarch of the fourth hive. These are my offspring." Daniel's arm dropped to his side. The pistol fell from his fingers and clattered on the stone floor. He did not have the strength to hold it anymore. The fever had taken too much from him. "I have searched for them for 6 days, said. I believed they were dead. I had already performed the mourning rituals. I had already accepted their loss." Blue reached her now and began climbing up her other leg. Scout followed close behind. The 3 young clustered around their mother, clicking and chirping in a storm of sound. Daniel watched them reunite. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the young ones had found their mother. Sadness that his strange little family was coming to an end. He leaned back against the cave wall. He was going to pass out soon. The infection was winning. At least he had done one good thing before he died. "Human," said sharply, "you are injured." "Yes," Daniel admitted. "My arm, it is infected. I do not think I have much time left." Studied him with those compound eyes. Daniel could not read her expression. He did not know if even had expressions. But something was happening behind those eyes. Some kind of decision was being made. "You saved my young," said slowly. "You are an enemy. You could have killed them. You could have used them as hostages. You could have left them to die. Instead, you fed them. You kept them warm. You protected them." "They are children," Daniel said simply. "I do not kill children." "Many of your kind have killed ours," said. "Many of my kind have killed yours. This is war. This is what war does." "I know," Daniel said, "but I am tired of war. I am tired of death. When I found them, I could not add more death to the world. There is already too much." Was silent again. Little One had crawled up to her shoulder and was nuzzling against her neck, but the small creature kept looking back at Daniel. Scout was doing the same thing, clicking softly and gesturing toward the human. "They do not want to leave you," said. There was surprise in her translated voice. "They have bonded with you. They see you as their kin-keeper." Daniel did not know what that meant. He tried to ask, but the words got lost somewhere between his brain and his mouth. The black spots were growing larger. He was fatting. "Human Daniel's voice cut through the fog. "Stay awake. I am not going to let you die." "Why?" Daniel managed to ask. "I am your enemy." "You were my enemy," said. "But you have done something that changes everything. Among my people there is an ancient law. It is older than this war. It is older than any war we have ever fought. The law says that one who saves a stranger's young, who feeds them and protects them as their own, becomes bound to their brood." She moved closer. Daniel flinched, expecting the killing blow. Instead, she picked him up with surprising gentleness. Her forearms cradled him like a child. "You protected my offspring," said. "You became their kin-keeper, and a kin-keeper cannot be abandoned. A kin-keeper is claimed by the brood." "I do not understand," Daniel whispered. "You will," said. "You are mine now, Daniel. You belong to the fourth hive, and we protect our own." She carried him out of the cave into the purple light of day. Daniel saw a transport ship waiting nearby, much larger than the crashed civilian craft. Other warriors stood around it, their weapons raised, their postures hostile. When they saw carrying a human, they clicked and hissed in anger. Made a loud, commanding sound that silenced them all. She spoke rapidly in her native language, gesturing to Daniel, to her 3 young who followed at her feet. The other warriors listened. Their hostility slowly changed to confusion, then to something that might have been amazement. One of them approached and handed a small device. She pressed it against Daniel's injured arm. He felt a sharp sting, then a spreading coolness. The burning pain began to fade. "Medicine," explained. "You will live." Daniel looked up at her face, at the compound eyes that had held such hatred just minutes ago. Now he saw something different in them. Not exactly warmth, not exactly friendship, but something close to respect. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I take you home," said. "To my hive. You will live among us. You will help raise my young as you have already begun to do. You will learn our ways and we will learn yours." "Your people will not accept me," Daniel said. "I am human, I am the enemy." "You were the enemy," corrected him. "Now you are kin. My word is law in the fourth hive. Any who challenge this will answer to me." She carried him onto the transport ship. The other warriors parted to let her pass. Their eyes followed Daniel with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, but none of them tried to stop her. Inside the ship, placed Daniel on a soft surface that molded to his body. The 3 young ones immediately climbed up to join him. Little one curled up on his chest. Blue pressed against his side. Scout sat by his head, clicking softly as if telling him a story. Daniel felt his eyes closing. The medicine was working, driving away the fever, allowing his body to finally rest. But before he fell asleep, he looked up at one more time. "Why?" he asked again. "You could have killed me, it would have been easier, simpler." Tilted her head. "You asked me why I spared you. Let me ask you the same question. Why did you save my young? Why did you risk your life for creatures you were taught to hate?" Daniel thought about this. He remembered the moment he had found them, trapped and crying under the wreckage. He remembered the choice he had made. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because they needed help, and because I hoped that maybe, somewhere in the universe, there was something more than just killing and dying." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps," she said, "there is." The ship lifted off. Daniel felt the vibration of the engines through the floor. He was leaving the moon behind. He was going to an alien world, to live among creatures he had been taught to fear and hate. But as little one made that soft humming sound against his chest, Daniel found that he was not afraid. For the first time in 7 years, he felt something that might have been hope. The news traveled fast. On both sides of the war, people heard the story. A human soldier had saved young from death. A brood matriarch had claimed him as kin instead of killing him. It was impossible. It was unheard of. It changed everything. Daniel spent his first month in the fourth hive learning how to survive in an alien world. The hive was a massive underground complex, carved into the rock of Prime itself. Thousands have lived there, working and fighting and raising their young in the dim light of bioluminescent plants that grew along the walls. At first the other avoided him. Some showed open hatred, clicking angrily whenever he passed. Others watched him with suspicion, waiting for him to prove himself a threat. A few simply ignored him, treating him as if he did not exist. But word was law. No one harmed him. No one tried to drive him away, and slowly, day by day, things began to change. It started with the young ones. Blue, Scout, and Little One stayed close to Daniel at all times. They played with him in the corridors of the hive. They slept beside him in the small chamber he had been given. They followed him everywhere, clicking and chirping as if teaching him their language. Other young saw this and grew curious. They began approaching Daniel, cautiously at first, then with increasing boldness. They poked at his soft human skin and pulled at his hair and made sounds of amazement when they realized he had only 2 arms. Daniel let them explore. He played with them as he played with Blue and Scout and Little One. The parents watched. They saw how gentle he was with their offspring. They saw how the young ones laughed and played around him without fear, and something in their attitude began to shift. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Daniel's commanding officer received the news of what had happened. Colonel Lane was furious. A soldier under her command had been taken by the enemy. Worse, he had apparently gone willingly. This was treason. This was betrayal. This could not stand. She demanded his immediate return. She threatened war crimes trials. She promised that when they got Daniel back, he would face execution for his crimes. The response surprised everyone. Instead of ignoring the demand or responding with violence, sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth for the first time in 7 years. 3 diplomats, unarmed and carrying white flags, approached the human battle lines with a message. The human called Daniel was now protected under the covenant of the brood. This was an ancient law, sacred to all. He had saved the young of a matriarch. He had been claimed as kin. Any attempt to harm him would be considered an attack on the 4th hive. Any attempt to take him by force would mean war not just with one hive, but with all the hives of. The message was clear. Daniel belonged to them now, and they would fight to protect him. The human government did not know how to respond. Some wanted to ignore the threat and launch a rescue mission. Others argued that this was an opportunity for peace. The debate raged for weeks while Daniel lived quietly among the aliens who had adopted him. He learned their language. It was hard at first. His human throat could not make many of the clicking sounds they used, but he learned to understand what they were saying, and he found other ways to communicate. Hand gestures, body language, simple words that he could pronounce. He learned their customs. He learned that valued family above all else. The brood was everything. Every member of a hive would die to protect the young. This was not just culture. It was instinct, burned deep into their biology. He learned why they had started the war with humanity. 7 years ago, a human mining corporation had landed on a small moon. They had not known that a nursery colony was hidden beneath the surface. Their digging had broken through the ceiling of the nursery chamber. Thousands of young had died in the collapse. They had responded with rage. They had attacked human settlements across 3 systems. The war had begun. Daniel understood now. He finally understood. This was not a war of conquest or hatred. This was a war of grief. A war of mothers who had lost their children and demanded blood in return. And he, a human soldier, had done something that no other human had ever done. He had saved young. He had proven that not all humans were murderers of children. The peace talks began 3 months after Daniel arrived at the 4th hive. They were tense and difficult. On both sides tried to stop them. There were assassination attempts. 3 diplomats were killed by human extremists. 2 human ambassadors were killed in retaliation by who wanted the war to continue. But the talks continued. Because the story of Daniel had spread too far to be silenced. On both sides, people were beginning to question what they had been told about the enemy. Human soldiers heard that one of their own had lived among them for months without being harmed. They heard that he played with their children and ate at their tables and was treated with respect. Warriors heard that a human had risked his life to save 3 of their young. They heard that he had refused to kill them even when he had the chance. They heard that he called himself their kin keeper. The hatred that had fueled the war for 7 years began to crack, not everywhere, not in everyone, but in enough people to make a difference. Daniel watched all of this from the fourth hive. He helped care for Blue and Scout and Little One, who were growing bigger every day. Blue was learning to fight, training with the warriors of the hive. Scout had developed a fascination with human medicine and spent hours asking Daniel questions about how humans healed their wounded. Little One refused to sleep anywhere except curled up next to Daniel's chest. Visited him often. At first their conversations were short and awkward. She was a warrior, a matriarch, a leader of her people. He was a former enemy, a strange alien creature living in her home. They had nothing in common except the 3 young ones they both loved. But slowly, they began to understand each other, told him about her life, about the mate she had lost in the early days of the war, about the burden of leading her hive through so much death and pain. Daniel told her about Earth, about his father, about the dreams he had once had of being a teacher instead of a soldier. "Do you regret it?" asked him one night. "Saving my young, becoming one of us, leaving your own people behind?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. "I regret the war," he said. "I regret all the killing and the death. I regret that it took so long for anyone to try talking instead of fighting. But I do not regret saving Blue and Scout and Little One. That is the best thing I have ever done." Was silent for a moment. Then she reached out with one of her clawed hands and touched his shoulder gently. "You are a strange creature, Daniel Hayes," she said. "But I am glad you crashed on that moon. I am glad my young found you." "So am I," Daniel said. Outside the hive, the war was slowly dying. The peace talks continued, painful and slow, but moving forward. Something had changed in the universe, something that could never be unchanged. And at the center of it all was one human soldier who had refused to kill 3 frightened children. 10 years had passed since the war ended. Daniel stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station that orbited Earth, watching shuttles fly back and forth between the station and the planet below. His hair had turned gray at the temples. His right leg, injured in the crash so long ago, still gave him trouble on cold days. But his eyes were bright and clear as he watched the future take shape before him. The shuttles were carrying the first mixed-species colony teams to New Eden, a green and blue world that humans had chosen together. It would be the first planet where both species lived side by side as equals. The first test of whether the peace could truly last. Stood beside him. She had grown older too. Her once golden shell was now streaked with silver, the sign of age and wisdom. She had stepped down as brood matriarch 3 years ago, passing the responsibility to the next generation. She said she was tired of politics. She said she wanted to spend her remaining years in peace. Daniel knew the truth. She had stepped down so she could stay close to him. "They look so small from up here," said, watching the shuttles. "So fragile. It is hard to believe they are carrying the hope of 2 species." "Small things can change the universe," Daniel replied. "I should know. 3 small things changed my life forever." Made the clicking sound that served as laughter. "They are not so small anymore." This was true. Blue had grown into a formidable warrior, respected throughout the hives. She had taken her mother's place as brood matriarch of the 4th hive, and she led with a wisdom that made proud. When she spoke of peace with humans, others listened. Her word carried weight. Scout had become a healer. She was the first to earn a human medical degree, studying at universities on Earth for 5 years. Now she ran the xenobiology wing at New Eden's Central Hospital. She had already saved hundreds of lives, human and alike. When children of either species were sick, their parents brought them to Scout. And Little One had never left Daniel's side. She stood behind them on the observation deck, a full-grown warrior now, but still making that soft humming sound when she was close to him. She had chosen not to take a position in the hives. She had chosen not to pursue a career among humans. Instead, she had become Daniel's translator, his companion, his protector. Where he went, she went. Where he stayed, she stayed. Some thought this was strange. Some humans thought it was disturbing. But Daniel and Little One did not care what others thought. They had been family since she was small enough to fit inside his jacket. They would be family until the end. A group of children ran past on the observation deck, laughing and shouting. Some were human, with round faces and soft skin. Some were, with compound eyes and clicking voices. They chased each other in a game that had no rules, tumbling over each other without fear. 10 years ago, such a sight would have been impossible. The two species would have attacked each other on sight. Parents would have screamed in terror to see their children so close to the enemy. But now the children played together as if they had never been taught to hate. This was the true victory, Daniel thought. Not the peace treaty, not the diplomatic stations and the colony ships. The true victory was in the eyes of children who saw each other as friends instead of monsters. "Do you ever think about what would have happened?" asked. "If you had not found my young that day, if you had walked past them in the jungle?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, I think about all the ways that moment could have gone differently." "And what do you think would have happened?" "The war would have continued," Daniel said. "More people would have died. More children would have lost their parents. More parents would have lost their children. The hatred would have grown until one side destroyed the other completely." "Yes," agreed. "I believe you are right. One small choice, one moment of mercy, it saved us all." "It was not just me," Daniel said. "You made a choice too. You could have killed me when you found me. Your law gave you permission to claim me, but it did not force you to do it. You chose to spare my life. You chose to give peace a chance." Was quiet for a moment. "I almost did not," she admitted. "When I first saw you there, holding my young, my first instinct was to tear you apart. 7 years of war had taught me to hate humans. 7 years of death had taught me that your kind was evil." "What changed your mind?" "My children," said simply. "The way they looked at you, the way they trusted you. I saw that you had cared for them. I saw that you had loved them. And I thought, if a human can love children, perhaps we are not so different after all." A shuttle passed close to the station windows, its lights blinking in the darkness of space. Daniel watched it go, carrying its cargo of pioneers toward a new world. "I was not a good man before the war," he said quietly. "I was not a bad man either. I was just ordinary. I did what I was told. I followed orders. I never thought about whether those orders were right or wrong." "And now?" asked. "Now I think about it every day. I think about all the I killed before that moon. I wonder if any of them had children waiting for them at home. I wonder if I created orphans without ever knowing." Little One stepped forward and pressed against his back, making that soft humming sound. She could feel his pain. She always could. "We all did terrible things," said. "That is what war does. It takes ordinary people and turns them into killers. It takes love and turns it into hatred. The only redemption is to choose differently when we have the chance." "And we chose differently," Daniel said. "Yes, we did." The station's announcement system crackled to life. A voice, speaking both in human language and clicks, announced that the last colony shuttle was preparing to depart. Any remaining passengers should board now. Daniel and were not going to New Eden. They were too old for pioneering. But they had come to watch the beginning of something new, something that would outlast them both. Blue appeared on the observation deck, her golden-red shell gleaming. She was leaving on the next shuttle, going to New Eden to establish the first diplomatic presence on the colony world. Scout was already there, setting up the hospital. The 3 children Daniel had saved were now leaders, helping to build the future. "Father," Blue said, using the human word she had learned long ago. "Mother, the shuttle is leaving soon." "We know," said. "We came to say goodbye." Blue approached Daniel and lowered her head until her compound eyes were level with his. "I wish you would come with us," she said. New Eden will need you, both of you. New Eden needs young people, Daniel said with a smile. Young people with energy and dreams. Old people like us would just slow you down. You are not old, Blue insisted. You saved my life. You raised me. You taught me that enemies can become family. That is not something old people do. Daniel reached up and touched Blue's face, feeling the smooth shell beneath his fingers. He remembered when that shell had been soft as jelly, when Blue had been small enough to fit in his hand. You will do great things, he said. You and Scout and Little One. You will build a world where no one has to fight anymore, where children can play together without fear. That is your destiny. Blue was silent for a moment. Then she made the sound of love deep and resonant. Thank you, she said, for everything. She turned and walked toward the shuttle bay. Watched her go, pride and sadness mixing in her posture. She will be a great leader, Daniel said. Yes, agreed. She learned from the best. Daniel was not sure if she meant herself or him, perhaps both. Little One pressed closer against his back. She was not leaving. She would never leave. Daniel reached back and placed his hand on her arm, feeling the familiar texture of her shell. I got lucky, he said softly. When my ship crashed on that moon, I thought I was going to die. Instead, I found a family. We both got lucky, said. The universe brought us together, and together we changed it. Outside the windows, the final shuttle departed for New Eden. Its lights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared among the stars. Somewhere out there, a new world was waiting, a world where humans would live as one. Daniel watched it go, feeling hope and peace and something like joy. He had started as a soldier, he had become a king-keeper, and in the end he had become something more. He had become a bridge between worlds. And that bridge would stand forever.